is February 28th, 2017, and it is 9:35, and we're now in order. Before we begin here, I did want to note that we had talked to, and I think members of the public were also ready for agenda item D to be B, and that's our budget workshop portion of this meeting. So I would like to move item B to D and D to B. So more respectful of our public who's here and staff who's ready to give that budget presentation, that budget workshop for us. With the board consensus, can we agree to that?
Yep.
At this time? Sure. Yes? Okay, great. Then at that time, we're on agenda item A as our public comment. So at this time, we can hear public comment on our agenda items only. This includes our closed session items or anything having to do with the budget workshop. Everyone who'd like to gets 3 minutes to speak at this time, and this might be your only opportunity to speak in theory. Since B is coming up first, this is your chance. So is there anyone, do we have any speaker cards?
We don't have any speaker cards at this time.
So is anyone ready to speak at this time? All right, seeing nothing, then I'll close the public comment and we'll move to our budget workshop. And for that, I will turn it over to Acting Superintendent Dr. Robertson.
Thank you, Madam President. Can we get the PowerPoint up, please? So today we're pleased to hold our first budget workshop for this year with our board. What we have today is we have many of our district leaders that will be coming forward and sharing expertise from their particular areas so that we can gather a breadth and depth of our budgets, where we've been throughout the LCAP process. A lot of our decisions that we've made moving forward have been from community input, and also knowing what our reality is moving forward regarding our multi-year budgets, which we've all heard throughout our board meetings. Do I need to turn this on, Tina? I got it. Okay. So what we hope today is we all have a shared understanding of really where is the governor going. We've already seen it monthly, but really in a large scale, looking at multi-year, and also some background information that people may not be aware of in terms of our programs, our needs. And again, this is just a slice of some big pieces in our district. And then we hope to engage the board in just a dialogue around establishing some budget parameters and or priorities so that as we look at our multi-year work, what are we looking at in terms of what frame we're staying within? So just a reminder of our college and career readiness for all students. This we can all say in our sleep. And to my right, I just want to remind you that all the LCAP goals are right there that help us to fulfill our mission for our students. So at this point of the session, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Zimzadeh, who's our interim associate superintendent, and Ms. Romero, if you wouldn't mind coming to the table. The two of them are going to share the larger picture of our budget, and then we're going to go into some background information. So Mr. Zimzadeh.
Good morning. Some factors impacting multi-year projections I'm just going to briefly mention. We all remember that CalSTARS and CalPERS employer contributions are still going up, and we have to actually pay those costs. Those expenses did not, we did not have them many years ago. Only a few years ago they started, and now we're going to have to also count for them. Health and welfare has always been going up. Always never keeps with the COLA, so that's going to be going up. Contribution to restricted programs such as special education, transportation, and maintenance, or they keep going up. Education will be receiving 40% versus 90% when the maintenance factor is done. Right now, we are in the maintenance factor, but you remember the governor did some changes to the deferred payments, and that's why that maintenance factor is going to be going down, and because of that, we're only going to get paid 40% of the state revenues, which is the Prop 98, and he only pays us the minimum. And when the target year reaches, then the COLA is going to be only expected, nothing else for that. So in order PUSD to remain solvent, there are just some recommendations. Resist using future revenues projections dollars to justify paying for ongoing expenditures in the current year, if you can. A future recession is predicted. I mean, everybody's talking about it, but we don't know when it's going to happen. And the gap funding percentage is not really mandatory, guaranteed in the law. Like we know for this year, they did not give us any gap. They only gave us the COLA. So very briefly, the state, again, recouping what we talked about previously, these are just the funding of the COLAs from 2013-14 to 2017-18. You can see that only 17-18, only 1.48% COLA, and the LCPF funding gap was not really there except for funding that COLA, 3.5 million. And one-time discretionary also went down, like you can see the peak of 2015, 16, 18, over 18 million went down to only 1.6 million. So, and normally this one-time money that they have been giving us, the reason is that they underproject the revenues, and later on when they come up with money, they say, well, we're not going to give you ongoing, so they put it as, or also as one time, or say for the mandated costs that they did not pay previously, and they pay for it now. So that's the one-time discretionary that normally they pay. And this is a very nice graph that is showing the funding for unduplicated people counts. And our district is funded on second bar here. And you can see that our unduplicated count is between 20 and 40%. Actually, it's 23.67. So this bar is really for the average, and ours is on the low side of that average. And for example, that average is $8,321 per ADA, and ours is $8,154. And you can see that we have some districts that are getting paid over $10,000, and that is very unfair. And the next chart also is the LCPF funding, and the purple and green are our bars, and the red and yellow are just the overall average district fundings. You can see ours started very low. What we've been funded is the green one, so it's very low. Going all the way to the target year is still going to be very low compared to the high target of the others. And also the target for us is low too. So those two bars are much lower than the left side bars. And unfortunately, that's just how it is. Okay, the next chart, it shows the funding for unified school districts in San Diego County. And you can see Poway is way below almost everybody other than two districts. And even like, for example, Coronado Unified, which is below us, they're getting a lot more money from federal government because of the PL 874 system that is there for bases and military housing. We're getting some money, but not enough. Oceanside, for example, gets a lot of money. So unfortunately, that's how it is.
Good morning, everyone. So I will go over the changes in our revenues and expenses since local control funding formula was implemented. So the table will have the district's revenue, including transfer in and other sources, starting the first year LCPF was established. I will not go over line by line item, but I want to highlight the change in revenue we received compared to prior year. So 13-14, this is the first year LCFF was implemented. So in this year, we got funded at 76% of LCFF target. The total revenue we receive is $292 million, over $292 million. Comparing it to 12-13, it's an increase of over $35 million in revenue. But I want to mention that out of this $35 million, there's $13 million included that are one-time, meaning in 14-15, they're not going to be available. So yes, we received $35.2 million more in revenue, but out of that, 7.3 is from the sale of water tower, and there's a one-time of 5.6 transfer in from other funds. If you want to know what is the transfer in, this is the transfer from CFD for the Design 39 F&E equipment purchase. And also this year, we did transfer money from special reserve for payment of the new Mighty PeopleSoft system. So that was our one time. In 14-15, our total revenue is over $303 million. It's an increase of 10.9, almost 11 million in revenue. Out of this 303 million in total revenue, we recognize in 14-15, 4.8, they're all one time. So we have 343 one-time transfer. Prop 39 categorical program got funded at 1 million. We have one-time discretionary of 2.3, and we have 1.1 million coming from financing sources. In 15-16, we did receive a lot of money, 353 million in total revenue and almost 50 million in increase of revenue. Again, out of this increase, 21.8 million is one time. So we will not see this revenue in 16-17. So these are the Educator Effectiveness Grant. It's a categorical program. Prop 39 got additional money of 1.1, and the one-time discretionary funding, we did receive 18 million. 16-17, an increase of 15 million in projected revenue. So 16-17 is budget projected. This is not actual. Of course, at the end of the year, when we do an audited, it will be the actual. So this is projection. You will see the transfer in and other sources. I highlighted it in red, or it's in red. For second interim, we added more transfer in from CFD, 1.5 million for technology expense reimbursement, and 1 million from self-insurance fund. So total of 368 million in total revenue, an increase of 15 million, and again, there 23.3 million in one time that you or we will not be available in 17-18. So you will see the comparison in 17-18 and 16-17 as far as revenue, it's a negative because of all this one-time revenue that's not going to be available in 17-18. So the next slide will go over the changes in our expenses. So expense in 13-14 compared to 12-13, it went up by 13.3 million, and of course we have our ongoing operational cost added in the expense, and on top of that, this is the first year of LCAP goals, so so we have the class size done in 13-14, so that's a total of increase in our expense of 13.4, and then 14-15, 38 million increase, over 38 million increase in expenses, and we have here the ongoing operational costs, the class size reduction. We did comprehensive counseling program. In 14-15, we added positions for Design 39 campus. We added custodians in 14-15. Also included in the 14-15 expense, of course, is the Prop 39 projects. We purchased buses and the D39 F&E purchases or Design 39 purchases of equipment. 15-16, increase of 15.7 million in our expenses. Again, on top of the ongoing operational costs, we also have here additional positions added in the budget, and we have provided a handout for a list of additional positions added in the 15-16. 16-17 and 17-18, again, this is budget, based on budget. So increase of 35 million in 16-17. We have the one-time technology upgrade we did this year. We have also the computer refresh and the RCS equipment purchase included in our 16-17, plus of course the new exploration program in RTI. 17-18, to balance the budget, we the difference between 17-18 and 16-17 is a negative. We reversing all those one-time expenses that we're doing in 16-17, so that's why it's a negative 237,477. This slide is a recap, or it's like a summary of the last two slides showing the difference between the revenue and expenses and what is the impact in our fund balance. So we separated unrestricted from restricted programs. So 13-14, a total of 11.5 increase in our general fund budget. 14-15, we have a decrease of 15.6 million in our ending balance, and this has to do also with those one-time money and one-time expenses that we have done in 14-15. 15-16, we have an increase of 18.4 million in our ending balance, and our projected ending balance for 16-17 in unrestricted, we were able to get rid of that negative and have a positive 250,000 in the projected ending balance. As far as restricted programs, it's a negative because we have categorical programs that get funded this year and might be spent in the next 3 years, so that will result a negative in the restricted programs. For 17-18, a negative of 18.8 million is projected in our fund balance. This slide is breakdown of expenses in the book supplies and materials. So I want to mention that out of this total expenses, there are expenses that are actually paid by donation money. And then we also provided a slide, the next slide, for breakdown of expenses spent under the category services and other operating expenses. I guess that's it, unless you guys have questions. Oh, there's one more? Okay, forgot about the last one. So the last slide is our projected multi-year workload budget. So we have, of course, the step-in column, the increase in health and welfare, which is always at 7.2%, the increase in STIRS and PERS, so the rate annually goes up. So every year, the increase in our workload here, you will see, is around 11 million. So 16-17, we added 11 million to cover all the workload expense or the preparational costs. In 17-18, additional 11 million because STIRS will go up, PERS will go up, and then of course the step-in column, and then health and welfare, and same thing in 18-19. So overall, for the multi-year projection in our budget, it's over 33 million increase in expense.
So before we move on to the next part, I just want to ask the board if they have any questions for Joy and or Cameron. If it's more around other detail, we can take that request and we'll be happy to gather that data for you and provide that for you after this meeting. All right, if we're okay, I will move forward. I know there was a lot of information there, and this is not the last time we'll be having this discussion, so I just want to make sure we have provided at least just some larger pictures for you to understand our budget. All right, Joy, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. All right, the next place we're going to do is just to provide you some background on things that we think you should know around needs and or programs, how they're serving our students throughout. You might know some of this, you might not. We hope to provide you, again, some of that larger picture, and we have various district leaders that will be coming up and sharing their information with us. And we're actually going to start out with Mr. Tim Purvis, who's our Director of Transportation. So, Tim.
Thank you, Mel, and good morning to the board. So I've provided you a lot of data on 2 slides here, some of which I believe you're familiar with, and I want to highlight, though, a few things on each sheet, and we can go back and answer questions at the end if you'd like. On the first sheet, essentially daily, the Transportation Department supports the needs of almost 4,000 students, with approximately 3,000 of those students in the general ed, or what folks think of the large buses, or think of it as the revenue-generating portion of the service. Special ed consumes a good majority of the daily work, though, on 81.5 routes, moving approximately 875 students, and that's a moving target from year to year. That's a majority of the buses you see on the road, though. We're operating the large buses in a state norm of about 59,000. That's a few $1,000s less than the statewide average, costing us about $669 per student. That seems relatively low, but remember, we're blessed with an internal revenue generation amount of money that many districts are not. On the special ed side, our costs are a little bit higher at $68,000 per bus to operate, or 6,334 students per bus. The remaining of the work, there's a lot of work that goes on in the department daily, scheduling field trips, and a lot of folks don't think of the amount of work that goes on during the summer with our extended school year special ed moves, which is nearly the same number of special ed children for other reasons, of course, as well as our ESS field trips and then the ongoing daily field trips. These trips, though, what I want to point out to you, are supported at about 2/3 the cost because we're able to supply it with those large buses that we keep in place. So it's kind of an elephant in the corner, as I call it, but a justified reason for those buses. On the next slide, there's a lot of data. But what I want to point out is a looming challenge for us. There's 151 certified school buses in the district's fleet, which is only a portion of the fleet we support. 57 of those buses are for home to school regular ed, and 94 are for special ed. 18 buses are past due for replacement. That's about 10.2% of our total number of buses in the fleet. Look down at the special ed side, though, which is the larger portion of what we do daily, and that's almost 35% of the total are due for replacement. You heard Joy say that in 14-15 we purchased buses. We try to keep 2 finance packages out at any given time for the renewal and replacement of buses. We have not been able to maintain the district's bus fleet because of the growth in special ed mainly. We have gotten ahead of that a little bit, but it's a looming challenge for us. That's a significant number of buses that are behind schedule and replacement, and our costs go up related to that. In addition, we're supporting other district support fleet for the M&O department, for our IT department, food and nutrition, warehouse, etc. 20% of mainly the maintenance and operations vehicles are behind, some of them very serious with replacement needs, and again, we've just kicked this can down the line to some degree. There's other responsibilities of the department that you may not be familiar with, and that's communications for both the regional communication system, which I know you're familiar with, but there's site-based communications, and we own numerous 200 megahertz frequencies that we maintain to allow our sites to have site-based communication, which is separate from the regional communication system. That's maintained out of the transportation department, as well as our support and trying to keep our principals from having to deal with both on-site and off-site traffic management.
All right, I'd like to turn it over to the board to see if you have any questions for Tim. Not yet.
Thought you were
For
waiting for
Tim
after Chad.
around transportation.
I have one, Tim. Excuse me, Dr. Purvis. I know that we did make some changes with regionalizing our special education programs, and part of that was about saving some money in transportation. Do you have any data on whether we did, whether that was a successful move for cost saving?
I don't want to say it has not been a successful move. We haven't realized any of the benefits of those moves as of yet, and I'm studying that right now because of the FCMAC review. But what I can tell you is that we held at the same number. We put 1/2 a bus on the road. That's good because we've been increasing by 1 to 3 buses annually. So that would tell me that those efforts did play some role in reducing some transportation. I just can't correlate it to that for certain as of yet.
And this is really the first year
Yes.
we've been doing it anyway.
Right.
Okay, so data
Yeah.
to come on
Right.
that, and okay.
Right, and that's a several-year implementation
Right.
too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this special ed as well, just because that number just struck me. It's the 6,800. It's the base, our base funding per pupil. So it's a shockingly high number. It just seems like there's got to be some way to transport for less, taxi or Uber.
Well, keeping in mind that the safest form of transportation for a school student is that school bus, and keeping in mind that if we can load that bus, our averages are running around 11 to 13. It doesn't sound like a lot, but students per bus over the course,
They're smaller
that is
buses.
about 3% higher than the statewide average. So while we are moving more kids than other similar districts in special ed, it is important to note that with the good work of our principals and leadership on a 3-tiered bell schedule, we're staying ahead, loading our buses better than a lot of other districts. Now, the discussion might be the number of students that we're identifying for transportation. The other means of transportation you mentioned, I would just have some concerns about the environment the child were in, number one, but number two, 2 of those means would not be less costly than a bus, but there could be a time for it, a single ride or a dual ride.
Right, or a van or something. So that cost for special ed per student, where does that fall with the state average?
State average is about 7,100 to 7,500. So we're very proud of that. But I want to keep in mind, too, that our principals have been very patient with us because most of our special ed, or most of our transportation is special ed, and that's what's dictating the 3-tiered bell schedule. If we did not maintain that 3-tiered bell schedule, those percentages would go way down.
I have a quick question for you. I've heard through the community, my involvement in other aspects of the community, that sometimes our PUSD buses are used for things like YMCA and maybe other programs. Where does that money go in that partnership, and is that any significant percentage? Can we expand things like that during the summers?
Good question. It's not large. I don't have the figure in front of me, but that money goes to Joy to offset our encroachment. I said that intentionally. Under Ed Code, we can do community services. We just can't be in competition for profit work. So any of those organizations and others, and we search for those. Some years we generate more than others. Over the last 3 years, it's been higher than it has been historically. We do some work for the city of Poway as well during the summer.
Go ahead.
Dr. Purvis, you mentioned during your presentation, you referred to the general education, the general education students transported daily as your revenue producing portion of this all, I suppose. You said 59,000 per bus to operate, At 57 regular ed buses, it's about 3.4 million. Can you explain what you mean by the revenue producing
Yes.
aspect of it?
Yeah, good question. There is state revenue that's been locked for over 12 years now. I think for Poway, it's about $1.5 million roughly. That rolls in under our local control funding formula. It's no longer identified to the special ed side and the home to school side. So we apply, Joy, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe about 1 million of that to our home to school general ed cost. And then we have been able to slowly get back up for the last 3 years at generating 1.1 million with about 88% of our students paying the $575 full year round trip cost. A little over 10% or so are riding as free, meeting the criteria. So we're running in two revenue sources there, and we're very fortunate to do that. Few districts, I only know of 2 other districts in the state that are generating over $1 million for that. Does not pay for itself.
Yeah, if I may add also, there is no COLA for that. From 2012, 13, they froze the amounts, and they later on 13, 14, they added to LCFF, but just is an add-on, and there is no COLA added. Never, even whenever we get COLA, let's say for LCFF or special ed, no COLA for transportation.
We've been trying for years, as some board members know. We got really close with legislation 2 years ago, and it got, knocked out at the governor's desk. But we still continue to work toward it.
Oh, yeah, well, it's just kind of a broken record as far as trying to figure out if we can expand the ridership for the general ed students.
It's a challenging question. I'm asked that all the time, Ms. Beatty. The bus doesn't cover the cost when we put it into place, so past boards have given us criteria trying to find an equal medium. The business side of your question is we need about 35 buses on the road to meet that field trip demand, of which I shared, that we're able to support our schools at about half the cost roughly. We found that when we were increasing from 9 to 12% about every other year, and I have about 25 years of data to show that history, that we would lose about 5 to 8%, and then the second year we'd bring back a percentage. The last time we increased, which was roughly 5 years ago, I believe, we fell. We lost the anticipated increase and lost some of the revenue, and it's taken us 5 years to get it back up to 1.1. We'd like for it to be 1.2.
Increase of ridership, you mean?
Yes, exactly. It just didn't come back to us, and
Right.
we can guess many reasons why that might be, but
And now, did you think it was because of the increase in price and doing away with the one-way passes?
well, the first, yes. I think that the increase of price, we knew we'd hit a ceiling someday. We never knew where it would be because there's no one to compare us to, and I believe we hit and maybe exceeded that ceiling. Interesting, everyone thinks, well, Tim, why don't you offer the one-way ride? About 15% of our riders right now would pay for a one-way ride if we offer it. Remember, we have to support that bus seat both directions. They all don't want to ride one way in the morning or the PM. So we made a choice to handle that bus pass as few times as possible, give you a bit of a discount if you purchased a full year round trip versus a semester, and also give you the advantage of purchasing that full year but do it in 2 payments, trying to keep our handling of the bus pass down, to keep the child on the ride both ways. It's still about $1.83 for a ride, which is a great deal. Excuse me, $1.63 for a ride, which is a great deal. But when we expand that service out, we don't bring in enough students, because at some point, especially with neighborhood elementaries, the parent is probably gauging the distance to school and other means choices they have versus a $575 pass. So it's a delicate balance.
All right, thank you, Mr. Purvis. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'd like to bring Mr. Chad Costner forward. He is our Director of Facilities Maintenance and Operations.
All right, thank you, Mel. Thank you, Board. So the really exciting stuff. We'll move on from buses, right? Hey, just wanted to give you kind of a real quick top-level overview of some of the facilities maintenance and operation, kind of what we do and what we're really dealing with as far as scope. So again, the numbers here are based on our last insurance summary, so they're kind of fresh and hot off the press. We're just over 4 million square foot of facilities that we maintain. This includes just shy of 800 structures that has a kind of an insurable property value of $903 million. Again, to be upfront, that would not that's not replacement value. So if we had to rebuild the district, you're looking at probably $1.5 billion based on current square footage costs for construction. And again, about 825 acres of property to take care of. Included in the FMNO department is facilities maintenance, and really what that includes is the recurring maintenance. That's keeping toilets flushing, that's keeping the electricity on, that's keeping what you've got in a maintained status. Also included is our grounds maintenance department that takes care of that 825 acres worth of property, in addition to maintaining all of our athletic fields as well. So it's a fairly significant portion of that. We also take care of new construction and capital improvement projects that are going into the district, as well as environmental and safety compliance issues as we go. And then facilities use requests. We maintain the desk there where the outside and internal groups that request to use our facilities after hours and process that. And that's fairly labor intensive, and that's something we'll probably want to come talk to the board about as well as how to better run that program and better capture some of the costs. There's been some new requirements out on that on how we can do that. The other piece that I forgot to throw in there that is equally valuable is kind of the energy management and utilities piece. I did not specifically break out, but that's another big chunk of what we're responsible for. This is just a quick snapshot of, hey, these are kind of real world fires burning under my feet right now that I don't have a clean funding source right now to get to. We're working through several different strategies. All right, how are we going to start addressing these issues? I don't want to leave the board with the impression that this is a total picture of what our facility needs are right now, because it is not. But this is really what some of our biggest challenges are. So Mesa Verde Middle School is significantly challenged in roof leaks. Basically all of the roofs on that campus need to be replaced. RB High School has also had some significant challenges with roof leaks lately. The number here is strictly for the flat roofs. In addition to that, the roofing themselves are okay on the other facilities, but the gutters are deteriorated. And the way that school is designed, there's a ton of interior gutters into those buildings that is a nightmare. So there's some challenges that we're trying to work through. We just had a roofing study done on those two schools and are getting better numbers on, okay, hey, where do we really go? What's repairable? What are we at? Hey, we really need to replace this roof in its entirety. But a building envelope for the district is really probably one of my top concerns. Hey, we've got to keep our facilities dry and keep other damage from happening. So that's one of the top priorities we've got. HVAC, or HVAC, air conditioning and heating, is also a significant challenge district-wide with several of our systems. RB in Bernardo Heights has been kind of the bane of my existence here since I got on board. And Mesa Verde is also, that school is significantly challenged in their HVAC. So the number here for RB is strictly for a chiller replacement that we're going through right now, and we're trying to how to get that school back up and running. And then Midland Elementary, this is a brand new one that just is about a week or two old for me, is the heating hot water loop at that school is leaking like a sieve, and it's we've got some real work we've got to do there. So, hey, just some other kind of big top picture numbers. Paving throughout the district, we've got a lot of challenges there. Again, this is just the $2 million will not repave the district. That's just to address some of our most critical facilities, both parking lots and playground areas at some of our schools. Flooring is, we could easily put $1 million into flooring throughout the district, and again, that's just the most critical stuff. Again, some of the other ones are just kind of top-level stuff. Hey, some track services are significantly deteriorated right now. We've got to do some repairs on that. And in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to look at refurbishing at least 2 of our tracks in the district. And then I just put portable building replacement. Kind of in general, that's part of a much larger program that we can kind of continue to need to be looking at. These buildings are at the end of their useful life, and they are at the point where they are really maintenance intensive, and they're a challenge for us throughout the district. Kind of just a quick summary slide here. Not that I need to beat the drum anymore, but hey, we've got, you know, our FM&O funds and our facilities are significantly underfunded to what it requires and where we're going. Now, some of the numbers that, you know, I came back from the cash conference, and they were going through a bunch of different things. This is a challenge, you know, at all school districts. We're not alone here. But for comparison's sake, commercial properties, roughly, they put in about 2% of the capital budget. You know, so if you've got $1 billion, you're putting in 2% of that capital asset value into maintenance and repairs every year. We're not even come close to that. I mean, we can't. No school in the state is able to keep up with that. But it's just, as a comparison's sake, that's what it takes to keep it up at that level. You know, I would say, you know, our roofing and our HVAC are our most significant challenges right now. Pavement as well. We really do have a lot of work to do there. You know, one of the things that I will be bringing back to the board as a recommendation is that, hey, we do a district-wide facilities assessment to really understand where do we focus our limited resources, and where do we get the most bang for our buck, and how do we maximize all of the assets that we do have, and what are the other programs that we can leverage through energy programs, through our funding, and what are the other funding sources we're going to ultimately need to go try to explore and figure out, you know, and how we keep up our capital facilities. We do have several of our schools that are in the window now, again, for modernization. They've hit that threshold. So you're looking at the CFD1 schools primarily, are now in that window for modernization. And then through an energy management, I think there's opportunities. The district has done a lot of good projects in the energy management world, and they've done some really good things. There's more to be done there, and I think we need to look at a much more programmatic view of energy management. I think you saw in the slides before, that is not an insignificant budget item. We're moving up to around $11 million a year in utility costs. So,
All right, so since I'm the facilitator of time, I would like to open it for a couple of questions, and then we're going to push forward if any board members have questions.
I have one quick question. We had a long meeting, so I'll keep my questions to new ones. For joint use agreements or any kind of facilities agreements, do we see good potential for offsetting any additional work and maintenance of those facilities with perhaps new types of agreements or new agreements going forward? Could that significantly impact our budget?
Yeah, let me tack on to that just because that was one of mine too. I was at Black Mountain Middle School's gym last night, filled to the brim. I mean, overflowing with kids last night, but the city was running it last night. And I know we have a joint use there. They've got trash cans in multiple places collecting rain as it falls into the gym. And that's not on your list, so I shudder to think what the critical ones are.
No, there's many more than what's on my list. So if you look back at, I guess, a good example. Let me pull the numbers here real quick just so I'm speaking out from my notes here. So at Twin Peaks Middle School and Meadowbrook Middle School, both of those are joint use facilities. Both of these roofing projects on here, we split the cost 50-50 with the city of Poway. And so that $280K is our portion, our 50% of a critical need project to redo the HVAC and the roof at that facility. And so they're in that window right now, and we're trying to get one this year and one next year. But yes, in that vein, there's some goodness. We share those costs. We can offset some of those costs. The other piece is, hey, as in our facility use to use our facilities, they've opened that window a little bit better to help us. We have the ability, if the board chooses, and if we reapprove our rates, to recapture some of those real costs that we incur. And so the rates we charge right now do not cover near enough of what it actually costs us to run those facilities.
The two schools you mentioned are City of Poway. What about City of San Diego?
The City of San Diego, so we have similar agreements with the City of San Diego. It's a separate joint use agreement, but it's very, very similar for Black Mountain.
50%?
I'll have to go back and look. I believe that it is, but I'll verify when I come back.
And I remember your predecessor, Mike Tarantino, said that the Black Mountain one needed to be renegotiated with the city, and I guess it was a scheduling issue or something, or who to talk to.
Yeah. So
San Diego.
Yes, I mean, so good point. I think they all are due to be relooked at. We're in discussions right now with the City of Poway to kind of try to relook at all of our joint use agreements. They've indicated, hey, they would love more time at our high school facilities, in particular, Poway High football field. If we can make that available to them for more time, they'd be willing to put in some more money or offset some more costs. There's some potentials that we're working through there. Obviously, we need it for our stuff as well. But how do we share that space a little better? How do we recapture those costs? The City of San Diego is absolutely ripe and due to be looked at again.
So is there an issue? I mean, do you know who we need to do that with? What department and what people? I mean, is there an issue with connecting with the right
So I have
people?
not reached out to the City of San Diego yet. I've been heavily involved with the City of Poway, but I know who I can go reach out to.
And I just had a quick question about the HVACs at RB. It was my understanding that back in, I guess you could check the records, but back in 2013, that $12 million was used for new HVAC systems at Rancho Bernardo High School.
So that I believe that included both Rancho Bernardo and Mount Carmel that had a bunch of work.
I think it was $20 million between the two.
Yeah, so there was some significant work that has been done at that plant. It is a challenging facility. So it's not to get too detailed on it, but you make hot water and you make cold water in the central plant, and it's pumped through both the middle school and the high school. So there's been challenges in the rooms themselves and with the pipes as well. When we lost hot water and we lost heat at RB High School, it was because we had one of the main hot water lines broke, and it's special equipment and it's special piping, and we just didn't have it, and it took a long time to get that in place. In addition to that, right now, one of the chillers it's a thermal storage plant. It makes ice all night, and it uses that ice to help cool that water down during the day. One of those chillers, which was one of the new ones, it's 6 years old, and of course it's got a 5-year warranty, is dead in the water right now, so it needs to be replaced. They should last longer than that. We're working with the manufacturers on, hey, what can we do? How do we, you guys really need to cut us a better deal because there's no way this should only last 6 years. So we're leveraging that, but that is a real challenge for that site.
All right, Mr. Koster, thank you very much for sharing all of that. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hueso, who's going to share some information about a couple of our programs directed by Personnel Support Services.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. I just would briefly like to highlight for the board and the public two very important programs who support the hiring and retention of highly qualified educators for the district. The PPAP program builds a common collaborative culture of high expectations and professionalism through offering specific, clear, purposeful, and immediate feedback to support educator improvement and district initiatives. The program does include not only supporting new educators to the district, but as well as induction, and includes an intervention component for permanent educators. It is a data-driven, standards-based feedback, which promotes reflection and new learning. To ensure the quality of the program and fidelity, there is a joint governance team between the district and PFT that monitors the program, the needs of the teachers, and aligns additional supports to provide every opportunity for growth. Currently, we have 111 participants that are supported by 1 coordinator and 6 teacher consultants. The second program is TPLES. This is the performance evaluation protocol for our teachers in the district. This is a research-based teacher evaluation system that has been developed in collaboration with PFT and the district. It has been developed with the district context, needs, and circumstances in mind. This new system emphasizes a professional growth model that includes a multiple measures approach that consists of standards-based evidence of practice, teachers' impact on student learning, teachers' impact on the profession, and is in alignment with the Poway Continuum of Teaching Standards for teachers. This new system has demonstrated how building support and evaluation for both beginning and struggling educators results in a system of growth and improvement. TPLES has received recognitions by various institutions and has been featured in at least 2 articles. Currently, there are over 462 teachers participating in this new performance evaluation program and is currently supported by 1 program coordinator.
All right, are there any questions from the board regarding these programs at this point?
I just want to clarify that on PPAP, 1 coordinator and 6 providers is 7 TOSAs altogether, or 6 TOSAs? Right?
7 released teachers.
It would be a total of 7 with
7.
1 with the coordinator having responsibility for managing the program as well as providing support.
And 1 for the other program, which I have never gotten that acronym right. How would you say it?
TPLES.
TPLES. Okay, I'm going to say it that way from now on. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hueso. And now from Learning Support Services, I'd like Eric Lehu and Kimberly Renz, both Executive Director 2s in our division.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson, board, members of the public. I'd like to do a quick overview, a thumbnail sketch of some of the services and work we're providing in Learning Support Services. This is primarily a presentation of the district level work, and we can answer other questions if you want to get into more site level work. First and foremost, it is our goal, our aspiration that we're ensuring that every student in our district is successful, and we do that through high quality instruction, effective resources, as well as a rigorous content base. And to implement that, we rely on state standards, but primarily we have a long history in Learning Support Services of understanding that we don't know the answers and that our work is guided by the quality instructional staff in our schools. And so we have a history of bringing teacher leaders together throughout the year. And these teacher leadership teams provide us the guidance as well as the recommendations, whether it be on instructional practices, staff development, or textbook adoptions or resource adoptions. And so we bring those teachers either through release days, but primarily through after school hourly, or through what Kimberly will speak about, some other salary structures to provide us the guidance and be able to bring that back to the site so that we can ripple that effect and that work into each classroom. Currently at the secondary level, we're doing work primarily we've just completed mathematics at the secondary level. It's finishing up this year and continuing a little more next year at the high school level. Health, education, and now we're focusing also with implementation of the new California state standards in science, how we bring those science standards on. Those are the primary areas, though we still deal with other areas in English language arts and other facets, PE, and those other aspects, visual and performing arts. So I wanted just to touch base on the fact that that structure is a critical element, and we dedicate a lot of time and effort to ensure that our teachers are providing us the guidance and recommendation for our work. We've broadened that, and we continue that at elementary and broaden it in some other programs, and Kimberly will speak to that.
Good morning. At the elementary level, we are fortunate enough to implement all the new standards every day. And so unlike secondary, we are really working to roll out the state standards in a manageable way for our teachers. So we started, we have a map of when we are rolling out our state standards from an awareness phase to final implementation. So all of our content are on a different cycle. So currently, 2 years ago, we worked with math and spent a couple years really implementing new math, the new standards, and then now currently we're working on ELA and English language development, as well as doing some deeper work around our early literacy initiatives and how we best support students who might have some reading difficulties. So we have two different structures. We have our district-wide leadership team, where our teachers who have specific passions around different content, we bring them together, one from each school site, and we either work with them through sub-release or after-school hours on an hourly. And those teachers typically help us build awareness back at the school site, and they work with the principal to get out and just do little drips of information for the staff, just to say, hey, science is coming. Like, for example, this year we have science leaders who are getting their own professional development and doing some work back at the site. Then we have another structure called elementary professional learning leaders, and they are designated by their team. They're on a different salary schedule, designated at their school sites, and that's more for our deep implementation phases of our content standards. So they come to the district and we provide them professional learning, and then provide them actual learning modules that then they go back and are a trainer back at their school sites around the different shifts for all of our different standards. And so we're excited about both of those structures. Currently, our elementary professional learning leaders, you might hear them as PLLs. This year the focus is on our collaboration and how we best support teachers in collaboration in alignment with our exploration model. And then we're also have a team of professional learning leaders supporting technology integration at the elementary sites as well.
I think before we leave this subject, I just want to make a quick shout out to Cindy DeClerc, our other executive director, who's been leading us in math and is working on science at elementary, and Beth Parasik, who helps us with the secondary instruction. I also would be remiss in not complimenting PFT. PFT is, I think, a unique employee organization in that it focuses on quality instruction, both in the T-plus process, as well as engaging with us in this instructional leadership and building partnerships about how we can improve the quality of instruction for our students and the support of teachers. And lastly, also, the work of Courtney Davis and Lynette Turner, because in the last 2 years, we've started to implement the same strategies we've built with PFT to try to build support for not only our special ed and other classified instructional staff, but all employees of the district. And so that really embodies a district mission that we support everyone's learning in our district. The big capital outlay, among other things, for learning support services are textbooks. They're quite expensive. I came and presented middle school math books, and people were surprised to hear it was $750,000, and that was cheaper than usual. Learning Support Services built a multi-year plan, approximately 4 years, of which there are $10 million costs in textbooks associated. The first level is English Language Arts at elementary. Kimberly has been working with a core group of teachers on that, both focused on TK5, but also early intervention and how we're supporting our youngest learners, especially in areas of difficulty, as the board has heard from several members of our community. Secondly, next generation science, TK12. As you can imagine, science materials, not only textbooks, but the materials to implement investigations and experiments begin to assume a very large cost. Following down, then we have social science, which was just recently adopted, and we have to find out how do we find the money for that. As I said, health has been adopted just recently, both in 7th and 9th grade. And then lastly, world languages and our other visual and performing arts round out what we would look in front of us for would be an approximate $10 million cost over the next 4 to 5 years. So that's really in a nutshell textbook. In those textbook adoptions, we use teachers, as Kimberly has been doing from each site, to pilot the materials, ensure they're meeting the needs of students first, covering the standards as well, and then secondly, have the ease of use and facilitation. Inside that also are digital resources. Just to let you know, we spend about $1 million on digital resources every year. Those go everything from the MyConnect site, as well as the Discovery Plus, maps, instructional materials, those kind of those amount to about $900,000 in costs.
Another model, as you well know, that we implemented this year is the exploration model. And, thank you, Mel. is the exploration model. And again, implementing that model came from our LCAP community forums with the feedback from parents wanting some equity across our district in the areas of visual performing arts, coding, hands-on science, and physical education. And so this year we're excited to have our exploration model occurring at every single one of our elementary sites, so that all of our transitional kindergarten through 5th grade students experience 13 times a year high-quality physical education, as well as visual performing arts, coding, and hands-on science. In fact, right now, they are working on portraits of their favorite heroes. So if you have kids right now in the elementary ages, you'll be seeing those, as well as if you follow Twitter and things of that nature and exploration model, you'll see some examples of the high-quality work that the teachers are doing. In addition to some rigorous curriculum, we also are happy to be engaging our classroom teachers in collaboration. When you take a look at the research, it is overwhelmingly evident that in order for us to be able to implement high quality instruction and the new standards and our curriculum, that teachers need opportunities to collaborate together. And so for 13 times during the school year, they come together as grade level teams and they plan lessons, they score assessments, and take a look at next best steps for student learning, and a multiple of other topics that they discuss during that collaboration time. So exploration really is a twofer, one for rigorous curriculum for our students, as well as high quality collaboration time built into the school day for our teachers.
Lastly, just to close, as we ensure that every student, make every effort to ensure that every student receives the education required for achieving college and career readiness, we have made a dedicated effort to focus on students that need assistance, both with their academics as well as potentially social emotional facets that are impacting their learning. And consequently, we have instituted aggressively this last year a response to intervention program in which we build systems inside every school, in which teachers and administrators are working together in partnership to build processes by which we identify those students, monitor their progress, and apply interventions. We're doing that on the side as well with special education. I did not speak to a teacher leadership group focused on special education at math at secondary, but we're rounding that out. Consequently, we have 6 half-time teacher facilitators as well as instructional coaches. They're the same person at the secondary. And then we have approximately 4.5 teachers who are servicing the elementary in that regard. I know there's been questions about TOSA, so I'll just throw this in as well. Currently at the district office in our side of the house, regular education, there are 2 teachers on special assignment, one who supports our English language learners. It's been a historical position. 3. And then there's 2, an elementary person who's focusing on language arts and mathematics, and then a secondary mathematics position. And that's what I have for right now.
Thank you. Any questions from the board for either Kimberly or Eric?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clerk, for coming up. So at this point, what we'd like to do now is engage the board in some processes. So we went back and looked at some historical documents. The last time that we were making some major reductions and changes in our district. And we went back to around 2008, where we found some principles that were put forth by the district in terms of if we have to look at budget reductions, what do we really want to stay within? How do we make recommendations and or decisions? So in 2008, there were these 4 points that were brought forward. Maintain district focus on college and career readiness for all students. First call on resources goes to the classroom. Maintain safe and orderly environment. And wherever possible, maintain staff and cut things. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Clerk, who is one of our executive directors in Learning Support Services, and she's going to engage you in a process where what are our priorities going to be moving forward as we do this work together. So, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Good morning, members of the board, members of public as well. As Dr. Robertson pointed out, we really learned some lessons as we transitioned to LCFF, as well as in our history, the times where it was necessary for us to engage in these budget conversations, unfortunately. And we did learn an important lesson that establishing those board priorities first provided that frame. It gave us that opportunity to put some sometimes difficult things on the table for consideration, and keeping it at that 30,000-foot level to say, does this match what our Poway Unified School District mission and value statements are all about? Do they align to the goals that we had up at the beginning of the presentation? Do they align to the 5 LCAP goals there? Those are all sort of like the playing field within which we want to engage and move into those conversations. We will go, if we could jump to the next slide just very, very briefly. Thank you, Steve. We will be getting into some specifics in just a moment, but if we could also now go back to the prior slide, we want to take a moment to allow you to individually reflect on the board priorities from 2008, and in doing so, engage in 2 questions for reflection. The first question would be, do these still hold true? Do we see those things that I talked about, the goals, the LCAP goals, and so on? Is this still part of who we are as a district, and do these still keep us at that 30,000-foot level to engage in the conversations we need to move forward with? And then the second question would be, what, if anything, might be missing from these? Because we do want to hear from you to help us move to the next steps around this work. So if you would individually take just a couple moments to reread that list of priorities and ask yourself those 2 questions. What still works? What, if anything, might be missing? I'll give you a couple moments to do that. And take about another 30 seconds to do that. Okay, so I'm going to ask Kimberly Renz to be a recorder for us as we open up at this time to members of the board. First of all, in any order, the 2 questions again were what works, what still resonates, and or what, if anything, is missing. So at this point, I'd like to just open it up. Kimberly will capture your thoughts and ideas, and at this time, it's for you.
I'd like to first discuss I think they are still good, first off. I'd like some clarification on first call on resources goes to the classroom. And I think this could be a slightly, it depends on what you look at and deem as to the classroom. And we just need to be mindful when we talk about this that it's not just the teacher in the classroom, but what are we talking about when we talk about the classroom? So I'd like to just open that topic up.
I'd like to buttress that by saying I agree with Dr. Patel and the fact that not all learning takes place in the classroom. I would be much more comfortable with using it saying first call goes to the sites because it's all the learning takes place on the sites. In particular, one of the problems that we had last time is that there was a disproportionate weight of the cuts that went on classified staff because of this focus on the quote-unquote classroom rather than the site itself. And I'd like to see that not happen again.
And in going back, Dr. Patel, to your question on need for clarification of that agreement on the fact that the first call on resources going back to the classrooms, it does go beyond that the teacher that's standing there. There's instructional aids, there's materials that need to go in there, there's research on effective practices, there's libraries, there's, my goodness, the bus drivers who get them to the school, there's so much. I don't think there is an individual in this organization that doesn't wake up every day first and foremost to serve our students. So point of clarification well taken.
Can I just add to that? And I think with what you said, Mr. Sellers, if you take going to the classroom and wherever possible maintaining staff, I think putting both of those together, I think addresses what you're speaking to.
Other thoughts?
I don't know if you were going to offer more clarification to the questions that Dr. Patel and Board Member Sellers asked, but I would echo both of them in saying I do think that all of the 4 bullet points from the 2008 board priorities hold true.
Okay.
I doubt that anybody here has any problem, particularly with the first one. I'm trying to reconcile the following 3 in as much as I think that they're all related, particularly the maintain safe and orderly environment relates to the first call on resources going to the classrooms and sites. And also, how does it reconcile with wherever possible maintain staff and cut things? I guess what I'm trying to get my mind around is that for a budget as large as ours of about $350 million, approximately 85% goes to people. The rest of 15% goes to everything else, which would include a number of the items that were pointed out as needed in facilities. And I'm throwing this out there rhetorically, but I understand the value, I understand the attraction for Poway Unified, and people want to work here because of the quality of education, the output. Yeah. At what point does that start to slip? And what do we broadcast to the community if it's perceived that we don't value the students because of the environment that we're providing, physical environment? I'm struck by $7 million in needed infrastructure repairs to Mesa Verde. It almost makes me wonder, do we just level the school and build it over? At what point does the increased cost of maintaining and repair get so high? Yeah, right. Maybe I'm going around in circles here a little bit, but I really, what I really want to see are more. This kind of goes into the second question you asked us to address. What might be missing? There's more of a focus on identifying alternative revenue sources. It was touched upon earlier. Joint use agreements, facility use requests. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Sponsorships, potentially. There's a whole separate conversation to be had with maybe even naming rights if we got into some things that are being discussed at Fields and Poway. I'll sound like a broken record here. I've mentioned this before. I'm very big on the importance of facilities and student safety. And last year, when I went to 34 of 39 schools in a 5.5-month window, there were some schools that it was clear to me are lacking in attention to their maintenance needs. And I just think that's a terrible signal to send to our students. How do we value them? And so I think I'd like to see a little bit more emphasis on facilities and improving the facilities, because I also think that I think that teachers and classified staff enjoy working in a nice environment.
Absolutely.
I mean, how long can we retain that quality staff if the infrastructure around them is crumbling? And the attraction of Poway Unified and its quality education output can only go so far if the facilities don't keep pace with it.
And I believe Kimberly has captured some of the what is missing, if anything, that you've just addressed. I do want to go back to the bullet point that says maintain safe and orderly environment, and just remind everyone that safe and orderly also includes the social, emotional, behavioral, academic needs of students as well. So environment, sometimes we think facilities, and definitely we've captured that thinking, but there's also other parts of that that I think are equally important to remember around that word.
To that point, student wellness would be very important.
Yes.
So counselors and things like that, I would not want to see,
Right.
and maybe that goes under staff, but at the same time, it highlights it in two different ways.
Correct.
We have to look at the cold, hard reality of all of this. And so the last one, when we're already talking about, layoff notices, not having temporaries return, we're already getting to the point of, it's a foregone conclusion, we're going to have to trim staff, so that it just becomes a matter of triaging. And we're not going to be able to alternative revenue our way out of the structural deficit, especially when we have workload increases of 11 million every year. So, and we can't keep in a discussion of structural deficits talk about all the great stuff that we want to maintain. We're here to make the hard decisions. We've had 3 years in a row of staff raises that we probably should have known we couldn't afford. So, we need to start being very frank about these realities, because these kinds of actions have consequences, and these facilities costs didn't just happen this year. They've been around for years. So, and yet we haven't been dealing with them, and now, the chickens are coming home to roost. But we have to stop dancing around it and start making some hard decisions and calling out the realities of some of the decisions that have been made in the past that have led us to where we are now, and talk about these cuts. So it's not a matter of if staff, but which staff are we looking at? Are we looking at temps? Are we looking at TOSAs? Is it in the management? Because we're not, as you said, it's 86% of the budget. So we can't take just that 15% and expect to save in that realm. So, I would say with regard to triage, we've already talked about the temporary teachers, or at least that's already been put forward by staff. Let's look in the last couple of years what positions have been added that maybe we need to rethink. Maybe positions in management, maybe it's TOSAs. How many staff or teachers do we have that are out of classroom that maybe we could put back in the classroom? So those are just some ideas.
And as I'm listening to you, Ms. Beatty, I'm reminded of one of the earlier slides presented by Mr. Azimzadeh, where it said we have to keep these cautions in mind, that the budget picture doesn't look like it's going to be improving, and so let's make sure that we're making decisions that have that in the background. Right. We will be moving into some more specific pieces, and in fact, Dr. Robertson, unless there are other thoughts around the board priorities, we can begin moving into that place.
I'll just add in, I'm comfortable with these 2008 priorities. I think that second bullet point is the most problematic for me because it seems very vague to me. I still don't know what you mean by resources. But overall, these still seem like, yes, absolutely, that these work for me. I like them, and with some of the clarifications. That second bullet point, I think, is still very vague for me. But otherwise, these priorities, yes, we might have to go beyond them, but as priorities, yes.
Okay, thank you. I do remember a phrase that was repeated often the last time we were needing to make some drastic cuts. And it was something like, for that third grader in that classroom, this is their year to be a third grader, and having that experience be memorable and doing what it needs to do to prepare them for the future, whether that's the next grade or beyond. And I don't know if that perhaps helps clarify that, and it does involve more than that teacher that's in front of that child. But for me, very often that speaks to me greatly, as it still needs to be something for that specific child, which is every child. So,
If the board's comfortable, we, staff, will take this back and maybe try to clarify a little bit more and bring that back, and then, moving forward with that as we look at our reductions.
Yeah, and I just want to add in here, we are committed to ending this portion of the meeting at 11:30 for the board and for everyone here. So we're going to get as much in as we can by 11:30, but we do have to move at that point.
yes.
All right, Mr. Zimzadeh.
At this time, I'm going to be talking about the 2017-18, but not really for 2017-18 because we're still going to have time. In the spring, we can massage the budget and actually look at the priorities. We can change that. But for the second interim purposes, we have to come up with some amounts to the county, and those are just placeholders. And we thought that what we had some meetings among ourselves, and we came up with some suggested cuts. And I think these cuts are within the parameters. I mean, they're not 100% compliable because, for example, at this time, only for now, since we do not have any negotiations completed, and we are in just process of negotiating, and so anything that relates to negotiations at this time for only this purpose, we have avoided. So this is going to continue. So the budget standards based on 2015-16 funding would give us $778,576. Temporarily suspend some adoption of textbooks, restricted and unrestricted, would give us $2 million. Department budgets reductions 10% overall will give us $1.3 million. Conference expense cutting by $400,000, and professional services and other contracts also another $500,000. So altogether, then we would have that over $5 million cuts just for the 2017-18 second interim reported, give it to the county. But the following year, we would have a lot of those things that you just talked about, the staff changes and whatever. They all have to be negotiated.
I just want to say, for me, the devil's in the detail on these things. The budget standards, I know in theory both those are. I've never seen actual stats on how the sites use that money and what they'd be losing if we cut that. I don't know what they're using it for, and I'd love to see those numbers. I know I've asked for that at least 2 or 3 times before. I'd love to see that before we say, yeah, that's out. Yeah, the conference expenses, I understand what that is, but who's using it? I know we use some of it. Who's using it? Where are we going? Are we flying to Fiji, or is this when we go to Sacramento? I want to know what these are. The professional services and other contracts, too. We can't cut all of our professional services contracts, so I think it matters what we're talking about for me.
See, we have reduced it. We have not just cut all of it, the conference expenses, so we have reduced $400,000. So there's still remaining there. And then we would have to, sit together and decide actually which areas and then bring it to board, and this would be our recommendations.
And I think going back to what I had mentioned before, some of these things, there have been ever-escalating costs. And so if you look at, say, the professional services, this would be about that cut would be about 8% of the total professional services cost. $6.5 million seems really high to pay outside consultants. And one start would be, where have we seen some substantial increases, and we can roll those back or even eliminate. And I know some of them came with LCPF or LCAP. With our LCAP also came these consultant services to compile the data and to analyze it. And maybe we could look again at some of those contracts, like the USD one. Is this work we could do in-house with regard to analyzing the data? Some of these, their aggregated reports don't seem to have a lot of utility. So I would think I'd like to be aggressive, for us to be aggressive on some of these outside consultancy contracts.
Sure, absolutely. But since time is of the essence right now, and we have to file our second interim, and actually go to the board meeting on the 7th, and then by the 15th has to be filed. So we will not have enough time to analyze all the details, but
I see.
it could happen like during the springtime and everything. And those are our staff are taking notes, and basically they will work on those.
So you're recommending going with what you have presented,
Just
and
temporarily.
then it's a work in progress
just
after that.
to the county. That's all. This doesn't mean that we're cutting these. No, just temporarily to the county. We're reporting it.
Yeah, and I recollect that I think when we were when we were in the Great Recession last time, I thought like there was just an immediate halt on travel.
There could have been. I don't remember, probably. So that could be
Drastic
something that
time,
we
so.
could look at also.
Just one more then. I'd like to add that I really don't like the 10% department budget reductions across the board. There are inevitably departments that are already really tight with their money and doing a fantastic job, and maybe that's everybody already, but some are doing better than others, and to ask everyone to cut 10% doesn't make sense to me. It's easy, but it doesn't make sense.
But it gives us 1.3 million. If not that, then what else? That's what we have to know. Because we can't just say we eliminate that, but we don't come up with the 5 million.
Other questions? All right, Cameron.
So for 2018-19, now this would be a little different. We would have more time, and we would get a lot more input from the board, and also our staff will work on compute some of these actually items that we have suggested here. But just briefly go through that. Like 1 day work year reduction across the board would give us $1.1 million. Proposed class size increase by one student TK-12 will give us $3.6 million. Then we have some other considerations. Suspending reclassification and reallocation of positions. Classified staff reductions, whatever it is, obviously negotiable and everything. Health and welfare benefits potentially could be a new cap negotiated or whatever. And hold, review, replacement, and hiring new positions. Early retirement incentive that we're working on it right now, but we don't have any actually data on it yet. Teachers on a special assignment TOSAs. Counselors, administrators, not all of them, just basically to look at them. Review and reductions in other operating expenses, all the things that the board was talking about.
I just had a couple of questions on this. One is the class size increase. Are we limited in K3 because of the state mandated class size reduction under LCPF?
Well, that part of the K3, even though is mandated by the state, is still negotiable. So if we negotiated with our PFD, whatever number, that would be through an MOU. It would be for the other grades. We don't have any limits in terms of state. But we would have to also see what is the right size,
And the 1 day, in the vein of keeping it away from the classroom, does that presume it's a non-school day?
I'm hoping so.
No.
Mel?
The students have to come to school 180 days. So is that 180? So the students will still be there. It would be the contract, like it would be a staff development day or a non-work day that we would reduce.
And we have about 8 of those. We're up to 8 now.
1, 2, is it at 8? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have to count them in my head. Okay.
On that, I'll just note that at the CSBA presentation that Darshana and I just attended, our district is on the very high end, actually the highest of anyone at that conference. At least we were the very highest, and other districts
180.
averaged 4 days less than us.
Had 184 in our school district.
Okay, and that was the average, is 184, and we were at 188. So that's something to keep in mind, just that statistically we're high right now.
It's also by class size. Very interesting. Other thoughts? All right, so let me just share with you what I think our next steps are moving forward. We're going to scrub through the board priorities and clean them up based on some vagueness that might be there. Again, keeping these at the 30,000-foot level, because that's really important as we come through and do our work. And these are the priorities we're going to also put front and center with moving forward LCAP community and our input. That should have an influence there. Departments, schools, and all of our bargaining units. So these are going to be critical for that work. Our next step also is to work closely with our new superintendent and our associate superintendent of business support services as we continue to work with all of you, the board, in a collaborative process. Because I think that's going to be really important for our community on present and future reductions to consider moving forward. And again, I know it's really important is maintaining our fiscal solvency, yet maintaining the excellence of our district together in partnership. So at this point, I really want to thank our whole leadership team. This was definitely a team effort, as you can see, of everybody coming together with their expertise to share. I'm hoping this isn't the first time we'll have this interaction, because I'm sure you'll have questions moving forward. But I really want to do a big shout out to Joy. So Joy, you need to stand up. Joy and her team have spent countless hours, as you can see from all the data, ensuring we have the specifics to our budget that will allow us to do the next deep work throughout our system. And I want to thank Joy for allowing me to come into her office every 5 minutes to clarify and ask questions. I learned so much from Joy, and she is definitely a resource. And also to the leadership of Cameron, because without Cameron helping to guide all of that work also, we wouldn't have been here today. So thank you. And I also want to thank Mr. Zimzadeh. Today is his last day with us as the interim associate superintendent, so thank you.
That should be the closing notes. It's deserving to be the closing note. But before we adjourn, I just wanted to add 2 more for the board, so they don't get lost. I agree with Ms. Beatty earlier. They're revenue focused, the 2 things I'm going to add, but they're not intended to solve the problem. But just because I don't think they will in and of themselves. But I do think that we also ought to look at more as far as our energy management and utilities. It wasn't lost on me too that $11 million, it's a pretty big chunk of the budget. So anything more we can do there. And also on our excess properties, or anything we can do with any real estate assets that we might have. Because Ms. Burgoyne loves more work.
All right. I just want to add a couple of things. And one, this is kind of external to the district. Maybe our board ought to prioritize some legislative lobbying with regard to the unfunded pension liabilities and the burden. 70% of the burden to shore up the pension funds is being placed on districts. So I calculated that between CalPERS and CalSTRS. In 2020, we'll be paying $39 million a year, up from an increase of $22 million. So that's 11% of our budget is going to go towards retiree benefits. And that money's going to come directly from the classroom. We talk about not wanting to, that's our operational budget. So the state made the mistake in the 1990s of increasing benefits and decreasing contributions, and then we had the recession, and that exacerbated things. But this plan that they came up with back in 2013, it just really unfairly hit school districts. So we should probably lobby for a separate revenue stream so it doesn't come out of our state revenue, because that's adding to that workload budget. It used to be the assumption was about $6 million every year with your step and column and your utilities and your benefits and special ed. So that's almost doubled now, and that's, every year then that just erodes your ability to provide a quality education. So I guess not just lobbying for with regard to the pensions, but as well as for increased funding for the schools to make up for those additional costs. So I don't know if that'll be very fruitful, but I don't know what else to do.
So with that, again, I'd like to thank everybody who's here today to learn about all this, and everyone who put in all the work to present this to us. There's a lot of detail in this that I think we don't often have all in one place. So that's really very, very helpful. So thank you, everyone. And we're ahead of schedule here. We're going to move to closed session now at 11:12. Thanks very much.